Welcome to the Scrapyard, a deck profile series in which I, Yura, aim to take a deep dive into Meadowlands decks and the theory on which they are built. Be they good, bad, or unplayable garbage, I will do my very best to break down what makes the deck tick, the goals it's trying to achieve, and where it ends up standing in the format. Today we are talking about kind of something similar to what we did the last time if you were around for that. We are talking about dinosaurs as a whole. And the reason why we're talking about dinosaurs instead of just the deck you see on your screen, Dino Rabbit, is because dinosaurs in Meadowlands all aim to do one thing, really. And that is, as fast as physically possible, make anything that is not a dinosaur, namely the Evolsaurs. These are dragons. They're not, I know the materials say dinosaurs, they're dragons. So realistically, the big goal of dinosaurs in this format is to not play dinosaurs, which is a little frustrating, I guess. We've actually started taking a look at if there are any actual like dinosaur boss monsters that are really worth looking at and playing around, and there's really not a whole lot going on here. Jurrac is realistically the only like subcategory of dinosaurs that even have a semi-relevant backup plan to just making the Evolsaurs. But even that deck, which we will be talking about today, also just kind of would rather make the Evolsaurs because they're just that good. It's a little frustrating to say the least, because I really wish the dinosaurs had like more of a unique identity or more of an opportunity to branch out and do other things, but instead we're here. So much like with the last Scrapyard, we're going to do a deep dive on these decks. We are going to go through the card pool they have access to, the ways in which the deck currently exists within the format, and I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of each of those. We're going to start off going through the dinosaur card pool and the potential ways that you could look into building dinosaurs in this format outside of the three lists that we are going to talk about today, unlike with last time where we talked about Psychic Synchro, where there only really was one list, and going through the card pool was more of a means of trying to decide of how to improve that specific list. Dinosaurs have a little bit more variance and some interesting backup plans that make it a little bit more interesting to talk about in a couple of different contexts. So we're going to start off with the card pool. We have a bunch of vanillas because dinosaurs have been around for a very long time. A handful of these are generally important for, of course, Dino Rabbit stuff and Rescue Rabbit plays for making quick Evolsaurs, which is like nice. Like that is a very solid direction. I think realistically, both this list and another list that we're going to talk about today probably could be running Rabbit, although only currently this one is because this is like Dino Rabbit. This is how the deck appeared historically and was the most relevant historically. So they are relevant for that. The only two that you're really going to be considering are the Sabersaurs and the Cabazals because they are the largest level 4 dinosaur monsters, with Sabersaurs, of course, being the better one at 19 and Cabazals being the worst one at 17. There are others, but they cap out at 16 and they're not ideal. Unless you like really want to cosplay Rex Raptor, you probably shouldn't be looking at these cards, but I guess if you want to do that, you're free to do so. There's also like a level 6 dinosaur. I don't think that's relevant for anything, but if you figure it out, if you can find a way to make that happen, do so. I think Frostosaurus is cool. It's got a good stat line. It's just kind of weird to, field. So that's kind of it for the vanillas. There's not a whole lot to be done there. On to the actual effect monsters. We're going to start off with the boss monsters because how Edo works is it just gives you like the highest attack things first, or maybe the highest levels first. So we've got some potential boss monsters here. I don't know if any of them are really relevant enough to call them like potential boss monsters, but they are here. We're going to mention them at the very least. So stick with me for a bit. Jurrac Titano is kind of an interesting card. It can't be special summoned, which is really unfortunate, but it also can't be targeted by trap or monster effects, which does give it a unique immunity to things like Fire Fist and a lot of their good removal traps in the format are targeted outside of exactly like Mirror Force and Torrential Tribute, but like it's immune to Compulse, it's immune to Fiendish Chain, it's immune to Bottomless Trap Hole. There are some trap cards that it does actually dodge, which are pretty nice. And it also like can boost itself up higher. The main problem with Titano is that all it really does is become a 4,000 attack monster. It doesn't have any removal. There's no like outside of battle phase effects. So it's a little hard to like warrant running this guy when all he does is get big. It's not even a multi-attacker too, which we do have a multi-attacker in the format, and it is something that is kind of interesting to talk about. So we're going to get there shortly. But I wish Titano could do something, but I unfortunately don't think it does quite enough. Superconductor Tyranno is, in theory, a way to like FTK. It like burns for 1,000 by tributing a monster. It's not great. It's like a decent sized body, but I don't think there's a great way of cheating it out outside of like, we do have Ultra Evolution Pill or Big Evolution Pill. I don't know about Ultra. We have one of the Evolution Pills. Maybe we have two of them, but I don't really think trying to get this guy to hand and then summoning that out is, all that relevant. Ultimate Tyranno is the multi-attacker that we do have. This is pre-errata Ultimate Tyranno. I'm going to be totally honest. I don't remember what the post-errata of this guy is. All I know is that this guy is a multi-attacker. It must attack first and can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each. That's not terrible. The problem is that's all it does. Much like how Titano has like built-in protection and it gets a little big, these two are very one-note boss monsters, which is a little unfortunate when we have so many monsters in the format that are doing multiple things. Like another part of this is that neither of these cards, or really any of these, do anything into the meta because Abyss Gaio stops them from attacking, and that's not great. And even these cards, like you can't special summon them to cheat them out to get around like Ophion because, Ophion. And even Titano, I can't even special summon anyway, so there's that. We've got Pyrorex, the Elemental Lord. Pyrorex is an interesting card. It's one of the Elemental Lords, so it requires you to have exactly 5 of its given attribute in the graveyard to summon it. And that's honestly not that difficult when playing something like Evols or Jurrac, which are both fire decks, and they're both fire dinosaur decks, believe it or not. This card is fine. It destroys something and it burns, but like, I don't really think it's worth it. It doesn't have any built-in protection, so if it does leave the field, you lose the battle phase of your next turn. And dinosaurs in this format tend to be very combat-oriented, specifically like Jurrac and Evol both, I think mostly Jurrac though, are very combat-oriented. They are... Even Dino Rabbit too, like Dino Rabbit's main dinosaur monster that isn't exactly the vanillas is Guaiba, which is relevant for exactly combat reasons. So if you're skipping your own battle phase because this guy got removed, then you're kind of really, really struggling. The rest of these are genuinely not really worth talking about. Super Agent Dino Beast is like, it can cheat itself out, I guess. And then if a dino is special summoned from your graveyard while it's on the field, you draw a card. Not really worth playing around. It's just kind of like weird to get to. Sauropod Brachion is, for some reason, has the Rescue Rabbit restriction of you can't summon it from your deck. I think the reason for that is so you can't get it off of like, what's the Earth Tutor guy? The Earth Combat Tutor. Well, one of them. I don't remember who it is. But regardless, I don't think this card is really worth it either. It's a flip summon monster and like meh. Black Tyranno does piercing. That's it. The other like Jurrac names, the larger ones, are kind of interesting, but they're really weird to get to because you can't easily summon them out of the deck. Because the main way you get to your Jurrac monsters is using like Guaiba that summons only things with 1700 or less attack, so like itself and smaller. But the bigger ones are, not quite that, so, not great. Dark Triceratops is a piercer, not relevant. The larger Evolsaurs are kind of interesting. You can actually access these, and I think the most relevant one is Elias. You can access these using Cassin. Oh, it's a reptile. That's another thing that we have to talk about is because of the Evolsaurs being a part of this deck, or rather being a part of this card pool, you have to factor in a handful of reptiles. Yeah, Casanero. This card, if it wins combat, can special summon 2 level 6 or lower fire dinosaur type monsters with the same name from your deck. Their effects are negated, but they do get you into Solda, which is kind of interesting. This card is decent. It's just it's a special summon negate, but it only uses one of its materials, unlike Lagia, which uses both, and Dolka is a monster negate for one. But back to the dinosaurs. This is, I mean, I think we've gone over kind of like the main issue with dinosaurs is that a lot of them are just very dated. Even with cards like Terias that like are in theory, like you can get them off of Casanero, it's just a 2400 guy. So like, it's not great. Like it's so hard to want these guys to be good. It really, really is so hard to want these guys to be good because Elias, if summoned off Casanero, doesn't even get its effect, which is not ideal. But it does get summoned out 2 of them, but it means you have to play 2 bricks in a deck that would otherwise just be very comfortable playing a bunch of 4s. There's like some Glad Beasts, a Guardian monster. Like we don't care about these monsters. Darwino is not awful. I just wish this guy was a 6 instead of a 5 because this would make Darwino able to turn like your Serrato into a 6, but it doesn't do that. It's a 5, so I don't even know what the hell you're supposed to be making with this guy. I think the idea is that like if you already have a 6 on your board, you can modulate this guy to a 6, or you can modulate something else to a 5 and then make a rank 5. But regardless, I don't think it's worth playing. We have some just other like old cards that just aren't great, like Jurrac Protops is a newer one, but it's still not good. But like Black Velocii, the Oxygeddon, and the Hydrogeddon are not great. We're not playing Jurassic World, so you don't want to play Destroyersaurus. Jurac Velo is going to be a part of the Jurrac deck. There's a handful of just like 1700 Jurrac monsters that are fine. Although Iguanon is not ideal. It's weird, right? This card pool, I'm going to start just like working through them now because they're not really all that interesting. There are 2, I guess 3 if we want to count Miracle Jurassic Egg, that are maybe worth considering for like a build around. Miracle Jurassic Egg can in theory summon out a dinosaur from your deck by just binning a bunch of dinos to your graveyard, which could do something. I don't really know what your win condition for doing this is, but it exists. It's a card to keep in your mind if you want to do something goofy. Tyranno Infinity does, in theory, make like macro dinos become a thing, but it's going to be really difficult to get that set up because dinos don't really have a good way of turboing through their deck. And then the final thing that we have access to is like Baby Ceratosaurus, which if you find a consistent way of popping the baby, that's fine. The main problem is that like we have ways of summoning dinos from deck in like Guaiba and Rescue Rabbit, so I don't really think Baby Ceratosaurus is all that great if you don't have a way of like popping it from the deck like the modern dino decks really have access to. And then like the extra deck stuff is all really generics, or they're the Jurrac synchros, which are not super relevant. So with that out of the way, that's the card pool for dinosaurs. We could in theory go over the reptiles, but I'm going to save that for when we get to the Evols side of things. That's kind of it. And that's bleak, if I'm going to be honest. There's a reason why Dino Rabbit doesn't really play that many actual dinosaurs, and half of your main deck here for monsters are not dinosaur monsters, but they are things that supplement a very powerful Xyz monster like Lagia or Dolka in things like Thunder King Ryo, Tour Guide to get a rank 3 on board, and of course the Rabbit that turbos you into the Evolsaurs. Dino Rabbit as a deck is, as I've mentioned multiple times at this point, the historical way this deck showed up and the historical representation for dinos in this format. It is a deck that plays very low to the ground. It tries to stick 1 or 2 relevant guys over the course of a couple of turns, and will back them up by a really powerful suit of spell and trap cards. Things like Duality to find your guys faster, Forbidden Lance to make sure that they stick, and then a whole just giant pile of trap cards that ensure that your bodies stick around longer than your opponents, and you can clear the board out to try and make it so that your guys can get through your opponent's bigger attack monsters, because this deck's attack ceiling does kind of cap out at like Gem Knight Pearl. You could in theory run a 3-mat to try and get around that, but there isn't really a lot of clean ways of getting 3 level 4s on board, unlike a handful of other decks. You could in theory play Instant Fusion here, but I don't really think there's a lot of reasons to do it because you aren't making good use out of your Instant Fusion targets. Because the main thing that you want to be doing with this deck is making the Evolsaur Xyz monsters, and the rest of the extra deck is just kind of a toolbox to hold you over until you get access to the Evolsaurs. That said, Dino Rabbit is a pretty self-explanatory deck. It can be built in a handful of different ways based on your preferences. Like, your trap lineup is very, very pilot-based. I am currently running 3 Compulse and Double Fiendish Chain, but I know some people will run Breakthrough Skill. I know there's a handful of other cards around in the format. There's just a handful of really solid trap cards that are worth running. I haven't gone through all of them, but there is a good chunk of them that are worth considering for a deck like this. I am not going to go through all of them because there are a lot of trap cards in the format, and there's 904 of them. We'd be here for a very long time if I went over every single potential thing that you could do with dinos in this format. I'm actually realizing there is a 4th deck that we can talk about that I will touch on in a little bit that we'll get. Ooh, didn't mean to do that. We'll touch on that in a second. That'll be at the end because I totally forgot there's a 4th list that we've labbed out for dinosaur related strategies. So we'll get there in a bit. But for Dino Rabbit, honestly, there isn't really a whole lot to talk about. It was good. People played it. It topped YCS Lil. I think it topped YCS Meadowlands as well. But yeah, the deck is solid. The Evolsaurs are good play arounds. But instead of just yapping on and on about what Dino Rabbit is, because I think everyone who might be watching this video will at least have an understanding of what Dino Rabbit is, or at the very least, by now, you have an idea of what it's supposed to do, because the thing that it does is pretty straightforward. I want to get into the other dinosaur decks, though. And the first one that we're going to talk about is Evols. Evols, or Evols, I don't really know how to pronounce it, is a really interesting strategy. It is honestly more of a reptile deck than a dinosaur deck. This is the original home of the Evolsaurs. The whole conceit of the Evol deck is that they evolve from reptiles to dinosaurs to dragons. And this is a deck that tries to focus in on that laddering. There is likely a better variant of this deck that exists where you play the Rescue Rabbit and the normal monster targets for it. But at that point, you might as well just be playing Dino Rabbit. So I don't even really think it's worth it. Because at this point, if you're trying to play Evol, you're playing Evol because you want to play Evol and because you don't want to play Dino Rabbit. And Evol does have some uniquely interesting things to it. Evol has, over Dino Rabbit, the ability to extend further. Where Dino Rabbit is very much a deck that tries to stick one guy a turn. Depending on your hand, Evols can actually do a pretty decent job of sticking more than that. Evo Force is the big card of this deck. Evil Force allows you to tribute an Evotile monster and special summon an Evolsaur monster from your deck. This is relevant for a handful of reasons, but mainly due to its interaction with Evoltile Najasho. Najasho reads when it's on the field and tributed, you can special summon an Evolsaur from your deck. So, because Evo Force tributes and then special summons an Evolsaur via the effect of an Evoltile, or rather it's treated as an effect of an Evoltile, you are getting 2 Evoltile special summon from deck triggers, which allows you to get into 2 Ceratos with their effects online, a Diplo with its effect online, or 2 Volcanoes with their effects online, and these all do something relevant. Cerato, when summoned by an Evoltile, gains 200 attack, and when it kills a monster by battle when special summoned by an Evoltile, it allows you to add an Evoltile monster from your deck to your hand. Diplo, when summoned by an Evoltile, can target a spell and trap card your opponent controls and destroy it. And Volcano is your main extender, where if it is special summoned by the effect of an Evoltile, you're going to target an Evolsaur monster in your graveyard and special summon that target, but it cannot declare an attack. This is going to be your main way of fielding multiple Evolsaurs to make your Evolsaurs. And this is a really cool strategy. I think this is, at least to me, more interesting to play. I'm not saying it's better than Dino Rabbit, because I think Dino Rabbit just generally has more room to fit in better tools. But I really, really like these cards. I think Evo Force is a very, very fun play around, and it lets you access just some really cool combos. The rest of the Evoltiles also do something interesting. We have, of course, I mentioned earlier, Casanero, which can get you into the level 6s, which can make Solda. We are not currently playing that, but it is an option. I am currently playing the Elganero to get the any Evolsaurs that you draw into your hand out of your hand, because you don't actually really want to see these guys in your hand. These are mostly bricks. You want to see the Evol tiles. And Elganero is a way of doing that cycling. If it is distributed on the field, it replaces itself with a draw, and then allows you to shuffle a dinosaur monster from your hand into the deck to add an Evol tile monster from your deck to your hand. So comboing this with Evo Force, this is a great way of getting like a big body on board in Serrata while also replacing any Evolsaur that is in your hand currently with something like a Joshua for next turn, or a Westlow, which is the only other Evol tile that we're running in the deck, which is a flip monster that allows you to special summon an Evolsaur monster from your deck, which will be via the effect of an Evol tile, so you will get your Evolsaur effects. There are a lot of Evolsaurs though, and I think there is a world in which you can mess around with a handful of these. I would definitely not recommend something like Terius, but Elias is an interesting card. Darwino, as I already mentioned, is kind of an interesting card, but I don't really know what you do with it. I haven't read really all of these. I know Pelta isn't great. It's like only triggers when it's destroyed by battle, and it's like the defense version of Serrata, which is not ideal. Casanero is, of course, a good Evol tile. I haven't actually read a whole lot of the other Evol tiles because I mean, well, I have read them. I just haven't really paid attention to them too much. Lagusocho is Foolish Burial for Evolsaurs, which can set up for your volcanoes, but unfortunately it cannot actually special summon an Evolsaur. It can only get you access to an Evol tile, which is not ideal. Odonto is a marauding captain for the deck, which isn't terrible, but again, you don't really want the Evolsaurs in your hand. You would rather have them in your deck to summon off of Najasho, Westlow, or Evo Force. And then we have Pluero and Gefiro, which Gefiro is a special summon out of Graveyard for Evolsaurs when it's destroyed by battle, which is pretty slow. And Pluero is the same thing, but summons from hand, which I guess technically Pluero isn't a destroyed by battle. It is a destroyed at all. So maybe you can do something funny with this with like Needle Sealing or Torrential Tribute. I know we've messed around with the cards like those in things like Worms or Geargia even, because you have cards that trigger off of that hand destruction, or rather you have cards that trigger off of that field destruction. So maybe there is something here. I think it is an interesting play around, but again, this kind of works with the fact that like you don't really want your Evolsaurs in your hand, you want them in your deck. So it is a way of unbricking you of an Evolsaur, but it doesn't really do much past that. So it's kind of a band-aid for an issue that you'd rather not have at all. We do have Ultra Evolution Pill, and we're going to come back to, I guess we can do this now. We're going to go touch on the Dinosaur spell traps. I know I probably should have done this in the initial wave of this, but I just kind of forgot to. We do actually have a couple of them that are worth it mentioning. And the reason why I'm bringing it up here is, I guess it's actually not a good place to bring it up here. It's better to bring it up in the Jurrac deck. But we're going to touch on it here because of Ultra Evolution Pill, and then we'll come back to Fossil Dig later. But Ultra Evolution Pill does, in theory, work with the Evol tiles. It feels like a card that is Evo Force, but for a guy in your hand. The main problem with Ultra Evolution Pill is that it is not treated as a summon via an Evol tile, so it will not trigger your Evolsaurs. It is an interesting card otherwise, but instead I think it is much better to unbrick yourself by using Elganero to put these guys back into the deck, where they can then be fetched using Evo Force, which is a much better use of your resources. We're going to come back to Fossil Dig because this deck actually does have its own unique searcher in Evo Diversity. And this works much better than Fossil Dig here because, again, you don't really want your dinosaurs in your hand here. It's kind of a running theme of dinosaurs in Meadowlands is that you don't want dinosaurs in your hand. You want them anywhere else. You want them under Xyz monsters. You want them in your deck. But if you find them in your hand and you're not playing Jurrac, you are playing a worse deck, which is so unbelievably depressing. Like, I want to play dinosaurs, not cards that work with the dinosaurs. Like, is that too much to ask? And apparently it is, because we're stuck with this. So a little not ideal. The rest of these are not great. I'm going to be so unbelievably honest with you. Tail Swipe is, like, in theory, Icarus attack for Dinosaurs, but it's like not good, and it's also a normal spell. And then Big Evolution Pill lets you like tribute summon dinosaurs, which if you've been paying attention, we are not playing high level dinosaurs. So why would we do that? We're not playing Jurassic World or Wasteland. We're not playing Raised Body Heat. There are some interesting trap cards, specifically Ninjutsu Art of Super Transformation, which we will come back to. There is a deck for that. But the rest of these, not ideal. Not super good, if I'm going to be honest. I do like this brew of Evolsaurs, though. I think Evol in this format is, even if it's a more casual brew of dinos, I think it is an interesting take on them. And at the very least, it gets to play around with some cool cards. There are like other Evo cards in here, but like no, like it's not good. Like Evo Karma protects your guys from like interaction when they're summoned, but no. Evo Price turns all of your Evoltile summons into targeted destructions, but like we have better things to do than that. Primordial Soup is functionally the same as Alganero, but it is on a continuous spell that only unclogs your hand, which is not ideal. There's just like, none of these cards are really worth playing, is the really unfortunate truth. There's a lot of them. There are a lot of these. Evo Instant is really close as like, in theory, a trap card version of Evo Force, but it doesn't treat the summon as if you are using an Evoltile. So why? What is the point of that? What are we doing here? Evo Branch is almost close. It's almost close, but also no, it's not. This technically gets you access to your Westlow, but like I don't want to blow up my own board to get access to a Westlow that's so slow. It's not ideal. The spell trap lineup for Evols are not great, except for exactly the tag out one in Evo Force and the Surger in Evo Diversity. In place of the hyper specific Evol cards that like protect your guys on summon, we're on a much better card of Forbidden Lance. This is to help our Seratos win combat, and also just lets us get over some like really annoying other cards. The 800 attack Shrink is very relevant. I will say, I think Shrink in here is maybe not super important. I could even see this like going down, like going up on arguably a more interesting card for this deck in Enemy Controller. I love this card in this deck. It is so unbelievably cool. Econ in this deck, specifically the second effective Econ, allows you to tribute a monster and target a face-up monster your opponent controls and take control of it. And that take control has no restrictions on it. It can attack, it can be used as Xyz material, it can do everything. And this also allows us to trigger our Najasho and our Alganero, which is a really, really cool synergy for an otherwise really solid card. Like even the first effect on Econ, if you're not tributing, is still fine. Like it's still a battle trick, and we do appreciate that a lot. I love Econ in this deck. It's honestly, to me, one of the main reasons to even play Evols, because of the interaction that this card has with this deck. Genuinely, if we had some trap cards that were like better, that tributed for cost, and then did something really awesome. Like, I wish we had Icarus Attack for dinosaurs. Wait, we do have Icarus Attack for reptiles, don't we? This is maybe a card worth playing in, where is it? Offerings to the Snake Deity destroys. Never mind. I got too excited. Don't play that. Never mind. God damn it. I got so excited for a second. I was like, wait a minute. We can play Offering to the Snake Deity. That's like really solid interaction on our opponent's turn. And we get to trigger the Najasho. That's sick. No, it doesn't work like that. All right, whatever. Regardless, there are some really interesting techs that you can make in a deck like this that gets additional pluses off of tributing. And I think Econ is a really good example of that. The rest of this deck is just generally good trap cards. Again, I think you could swap this Shrink out for another good trap card of your choice, something that helps you just like generate tempo or win combat, because these guys are relatively small. Again, these cards tend to cap out at like 2600 is the biggest stat on a card in this deck. Even Serato only gets up to 21, even with the boost, so it's not great. Definitely worth considering. If you want to mess around with this deck, I think there are a lot of other options. This is just kind of where the deck is currently sitting. But it does get to make the Logia and the Dolka relatively consistently, which is kind of the dinosaur game plan in this format. The side deck for both this deck and the Dino Rabbit are pretty standard. I will say, going back to Dino Rabbit for a little bit, Dimensional Fissure is a card that this deck uniquely gets to play out of all three, I guess all four Dino decks, because this deck does not give a single crap about its graveyard. You could probably even main this, if I'm going to be honest. Macro Rabbit is a deck that existed for a very good reason. Additionally, if you want to play a more historically accurate version of the Dino Rabbit deck, you could also play Gene Warped Warwolf, which can make use of the Fire Fist Tiger King, and you're just playing like Dino Rabbit Fist at that point with the Fire Fist monsters and tankies as additional ways of like souping up your deck and just having more monsters that do really good things on their own. That is kind of Dino Rabbit's entire shtick, is just like single monsters that on normal summon apply a lot of pressure. And the Fire Fist monsters are phenomenal for that. They are really, really good targets for that. I know we've been kind of jumping around a lot. I'm going to try to stop doing that, but I did want to come back and talk about Di-Fi because I did totally forget about it. But there is a lot of room to be doing things with a deck like Dino Rabbit. You could do a lot with this deck. This is just currently the variant that I'm on. It's the variant that is more dinosaur focused. I think a better version of this deck is probably Dino Rabbit Fist, because you are utilizing the Fire Fist monsters to, hold tempo, and you don't have to worry about just like drawing into a bunch of like bad vanillas. You can actually do something with the monsters in your deck on field, as opposed to just trying to turn them into better Xyz monsters. The third list that we're going to talk about today is Jurrac. And I know we've been jumping around a lot. I'm going to try and stick with just the Jurracs for this. This is where my Jurrac list is currently at. It is very, very combat focused. You'll notice we're only on like 4 actual Jurrac names among the 20 of them. So, I guess 2 of these are duplicates because they are on alt art. But there is a lot of like bad Jurrac names. I think the best ones are absolutely Velo, Guaiba, Dino, and Aolo. Those are far and away the best ones to be on. So why play Jurrac over Dino Rabbit or Evol? The main reason is for the synchro plays. I'm going to be honest. Jurrac does get access to tuner monsters. It has a level 3 tuner and a level 1 tuner, which lets you branch out into some decently powerful synchro monsters. I kind of hinted at it in the intro to Meadowlands. This deck does get to do something silly where you can, using a bunch of resources, make a Jurrac Meteor with some setup. And this card is good. It is just a nuke that summons a tuner from your graveyard, and then that tuner being Aolo can get you access to a Guaiba or like a Velo, which can then keep you alive for like another turn, which is pretty nice. But the other Jurrac synchros aren't awful. I think the worst one to try to make is Velfido, because we don't really have a good way of making it. If you're going to do a Guaiba and an Aolo, you might as well just like use the Aolo effect, attribute itself to summon like a second dinosaur from your graveyard and just make an Evolsaur instead. But you can use Jurrac Giganoto to get really, really big. And that is a benefit that this deck has that the other dinosaur decks don't really have, is this deck puts up numbers. It can make your guys very, very large if you put the resources in to make like a Giganoto. The main problem with making Giganoto is its level, honestly. If this guy was an 8 or a 6, we would be so much better off. But it being a 7 is a lot weirder to make use out of, because it means you pretty much have to use Velo or Guaiba plus Dino. And these are cards that are typically better off on the field or making an Evolsaur. That said, this is a synchro deck, so we do kind of want to play Instant Fusion, and this deck, much like I mentioned in the intro to Meadowlands, does have a unique Instant Fusion target in Practical. It's a non-effect Dino Fusion monster that is level 5. And that's kind of the main reason why Giganoto being a 7 is awkward, because if it was an 8, you could use Dino, and if it was a 6, you could use Aolo plus Practical. But it being a 7 means you don't really have a clean way of getting into Giganoto without using a bunch of resources from your field. The synchro stuff aside, though, Jurrac is probably the most combat-focused deck out of the dinosaur decks that we're going to talk about today. Gwaiba, Velo, and Dino all have effects that relate to the battle phase, with Velo summoning a Jurrac monster with 1700 or less attack from your deck when it is destroyed by battle instead of the graveyard while in attack position. Gwaiba summoning the same restriction of Jurrac, 1700 or less attack from deck by killing an opponent's monster by battle, and Dino letting you tribute a Jurrac monster if it wins combat to draw 2 cards. Dino is great for an advantage engine, and both Gwaiba and Velo exist to, Gwaiba mostly, gets you into your rank 4 plays. In theory, it is a way to get into your synchro monsters because you can go Gwaiba into Dino into Giganoto, or if you have additional setup on board, you can go Gwaiba, Dino, and then like something else into like Meteor, or if you have Instant Fusion access, you can go Instant Fusion plus Dino into Crimson Blader or Stardust, which is not terrible. These are still good cards. But because this deck is so combat oriented, we are playing a lot more combat focused cards to facilitate this strategy. We're on the Forbidden Lances, of course, the Shrinks, and the 3 copies of Forbidden Dresses. Forbidden Dress is really interesting. It forces your opponent to out a Velo through combat, which is nice. It means for the most part, you probably will not die that turn, and the Velo should, in theory, get you access to the rest of your engine, which is nice, but it's still kind of a hard setup because there are ways of clearing like a single Velo through combat and then like removing the other one with its effects negated or something like that. Like there are ways around this. You can break through 3 Velo if that is what it takes. They're not that large. Because we're on so many of these combat trick spell cards, we don't really have a whole lot of room to play a lot of trap cards, which is a little unfortunate. I think it is maybe worth playing the bottomlesses here instead of the mirror forces because we are on so many battle tricks already. So I think I am actually going to do that. And then this is one of the decks, probably the only deck that actually cares about dinosaurs in its hand. So we are on 3 copies of Fossil Dig here. Fossil Dig is a phenomenal searcher. It is not once per turn, and it can find things above level 4. The problem is, and we've already kind of talked about this, there aren't a lot of like dino names above level 4 that you really care about. Even some of the smaller like Jurrac names, like they don't really do anything all that relevant. Like Galim, like forces your opponent to discard or it destroys the monster that destroyed it in battle. Terra is like bad. it's like Wall of Illusion. Brachus makes itself indestructible by battle if you have another Jurrac on board. Like a lot of these cards just aren't relevant enough to do anything. It's really unfortunate. Meteor is kind of the star of the show here. It nuking the board is really nice, and it's mandatory, so it can't miss timing, but like also good luck missing timing with this card anyway because it's like on synchro summon. The problem with Meteor is its synchro materials. Being a Jurrac tuner and 2 or more non-tuner dinosaur type monsters means you have to go like AOLO plus Gwaiba plus Instant Fusion to make it, which is hard. That is very hard to set up. And if this guy gets negated, you have nothing. You just are left with nothing. So I am torn on Jurrac as a whole. I think there is a world in which you play Molten Destruction to as just like this 3 of that you can find relatively easily that more often guarantees that your guys are going to be bigger than your opponent's guys. The 500 boost is really nice, and comboing that with like a Shrink or a Forbidden Lance is nice. It also has the additional benefit of checking any other deck that is going to be running field spells, things like Spellbook that are trying to get set up the Grand Spellbook Tower or Dark World with Gates of Dark World. It's nice to have, but it's also just kind of like weird because on its own it doesn't do anything. And much like having like Lance and Shrink and stuff, it requires you to actually be able to find your Jurrac names to benefit off of it, which is a little weird. The rest of this deck is pretty straightforward. I will say I want to point out the Brotherhood of the Firefist Horse Prince that we have access to. This can be summoned using what is it? Practical and Aeolo, which can summon a Dino out of deck, which is pretty fun. It specifically summons a level 3 fire monster, and Dino is a level 3 fire monster. If they survive the turn, you can try and do something a little further past that. You could even, like, if the Dino wins combat off of the summon of Horse Prince, you can just tribute it off to draw 2 cards, which is not terrible. And it's not super uncommon to find Instant Fusion plus Aeolo. These are like 3 ofs in the deck. You're going to find them over the course of a game. This is a deck that is currently playing Pachycephalo in the side. I don't know if it should be, if I'm going to be super for real. You can, in theory, find it off of the Summoner Monk that we are on in main. And Monk in here is pretty nice because it's just like a way of getting another 4 on board. It can't, unfortunately, make the Evolsaurs, but it can. Because we are on so many spell cards, it can just like make a Maestro, which stops you from dying. Or it can be a way to out an Ophion by going into like the Maestro or the Gaga Cowboy to run over the Ophion. So the Monk is in here to like try and make these things happen. It can also get you access to like a Velo. And if the Velo dies in combat, you get access to another Jurrac name, which can ideally survive until next turn, where you can then put on the pressure by like swinging over with a Gwaiba. This deck does have a lot of tools. I do think it is probably the weakest of the 3 that we've talked about so far, although I do think its backup plan is probably one of the more interesting ones, although I do really like Evol. I think Evol is very, very good, at least for my brain. I'm not saying Evol is a good deck. I'm saying Evol is an interesting deck, and it is fun to pilot. Jurrac has definitely better pilots than me and could probably make a better version of this deck than I can. This is just where I am personally at with it. And I do think it, at the very least, is an interesting brew. The final deck that we're going to talk about, though, is Ninja Jurrac. And this is arguably more of a Ninja deck than it is a Jurrac deck, but it can make the Evolsaurs off of double Gwaiba. And the main reason this deck works at all, and it's just also probably going to come back up, I'm not going to talk about it too much because it's going to come back up in a future Scrapyard where we talk about Ninja and all of the variants that Ninja brings to the table. But the main reason we're talking about it here is for Ninjutsu Art of Super Transformation. This is another way of getting a dinosaur on board through interruption. Super Transformation specifically reads, you target a ninja monster you control and a face-up monster your opponent controls, send them both to the graveyard, and then special summon a dragon, dinosaur, or sea serpent monster from your deck whose level is less than or equal to the combined original levels of the sent monsters. This in this deck is getting you access to your Gwaiba, and then Gwaiba can run over something to get access to the second Gwaiba, which will then make an Evolsaur. It's just a little cute interaction. I'm not going to delve on this deck too much. I probably won't even show replays for this deck because it's going to be more thoroughly covered in the Ninja Scrapyard that is happening. Is that next weekend? Next Sunday will be the Ninja Scrapyard. So we'll come back to this next weekend, but I did want to at least mention this deck here because it is kind of a dinosaur deck. It's not really a dinosaur deck, but like it sometimes is a dinosaur deck, right? But that said, I do want to, at the very least, show some replays off so I can show you all how these decks play into the current format of Meadowlands. And we also will have replays in here for Dino Rabbit Fist. Let me just really quick make that deck, I guess. I feel like it is worth having in here just because this is a relevant deck in the format and it is good. It is probably the best version of this deck that is available in this format, even if it is less of a dinosaur deck and more of like a good stuff deck. That's fine. Like, we have good stuff decks around. They're relevant for a reason. I have to take out some trap cards here, probably the Torrentials. You're going to get to see some live deck building here because, I don't know. What else am I going to do here? This Minecon can come out, although it is a good card. Probably don't need the Book of Moon. Probably want a Tensu, at least one, so we can actually make some better use out of the Gene Warp Werewolf. I'm actually totally okay playing a 2 Gene Warp Werewolf. This is a like whatever card. If you draw into one of it, it's fine. You can just use the Rescue Rabbit to make your Evolsaur instead of your Tiger King, which I do have to add. And that is 15 exactly. And then I'm just going to take out probably these Fiendish Chains. And we will call this Meadow Dino Rabbit Fist. I can't type. I'm so sorry. All right. With that stuff out of the way, let's show these decks off in some games, shall we? All right, we're starting things off with a Dino Rabbit because I guess it's the first deck that we covered, so might as well. We've got kind of a fine hand, except for the fact that our opponent is open to Effect Veiler, so this Rescue Rabbit is going to be doing its best impression of a low-level vanilla. So let's start this off and see what we got. We're going to join to Forbidden Lance and leave this Rabbit. Rabbit is going to be met by the Veiler, and we're going to set both the Lance and the Book of Moon and pass to our Gemini opponent. They're going to go Hero Lives. Hero Lives paying half their life points for a Prisma. Prisma is going to get booked and flip face down before they normal summon a Garnet and walk over this Rescue Rabbit. They're going to pass turn. We're going to go over to us. We find a Gwaiba off the top, which is phenomenal for running over that Prisma that we set with a Book of Moon and then getting another Gwaiba out of deck. Before then, in main phase 2, Xyz summoning into a Logia. Opponent's going to draw a Gem Armadillo for turn. Armadillo is going to be normal summon and get out a Gemini Amber. They're going to go Evolsaur Chain, but we are going to Logia it. They're going to go Photon Thrasher and follow with a Monster Reborn for a Prisma. Prisma is going to activate and send a Garnet to the graveyard before Xyz summoning into a second Evolsaur Chain. They're going to go Evolsaur Chain, send this copy of Gemini Fusion to the graveyard. Gemini Fusion is going to add itself back and then Fusion Summon into a Prismara. The Obsidian is going to trigger in graveyard, getting an Amber to a field, and then the Gemini Fusion is going to add itself back to hand by banishing an Obsidian to give a target for the Prismara discard. They're going to go combat, walk for 2450, 1600, and 18, and it's back over to us. Now, we're not quite dead yet. We do have a Dark Hole online, which is perfect to clear up this board. We're going to normal summon out this Ryo, which is going to put our opponent on a better habit. They're going to draw to a Gemini Fusion, which does currently nothing. They're going to set it and pass it over to us. We are then going to Heavy Storm, whatever back row that might be, which is the Gemini Fusion, which wasn't doing anything, before walking in for lethal. Pretty phenomenal game one. Even though we didn't get our Rescue Rabbit off, they did have an Effect Veiler in hand, although this hand from them is looking significantly worse. No real good extension, and a lot of just basic and normal summons, and a Garnet. The OG Garnet sitting in their hand. They do have a Judgment, though, so that is something to watch out for. They're going to start things off and find an Obsidian off the top. They're going to go Gem Armadillo, adding to hand another copy of Obsidian before setting this Judgment. It's going to pass over to us. We're going to find Rescue Rabbit. We're going to go Pot of Duality here, finding up the top a Monster Reborn. We're going to go Sabersaurus. Sabersaurus is going to walk over the Gem Armadillo. They're not going to use the Judgment because who Judgment's a normal monster. They're going to find up the top a Gemini Fusion, which is pretty phenomenal, but we are going to Judgment that. And they do not have any Gemnites in graveyard, so if that does go to the graveyard, they would have nothing, but they are going to change the Judgment of their own to ensure it resolves. They're going to fusion out this combi of Prismora. Prismora is going to get Book of Moon while some triggers in the graveyard go, getting this Amber back. They're going to add the Gemini Fusion back, and then they're going to fuse into a Gemini Master Diamond. The Obsidian is going to proc again, summoning a Garnet, and then they're going to add the Gemini Fusion back before going Amber. Amber is going to do its add back of Obsidian, and then they're going to go Master Diamond banishing the Prismora to get its effect, and then the Master Diamond is going to send the Obsidian to send our guy. All right, rough game 2. That was a pretty insane hand from them, drawing that Gemini Fusion, but this game 3 is looking really bad for them. We do still have the Rabbit versus Veiler thing that's going to happen. It is what it is. But we've opened Di-Fi Macrocosmos, which is pretty detrimental for them going first. We're going to find another Dimensional Fissure off the top. They're going to Veiler our Rabbit, and we're going to activate this Dimensional Fissure before setting the Mind Crash and passing turn. They're going to go Thrasher and this Amber to make a Evolsaur Chain. But unfortunately, that Evolsaur Chain is going to have to banish the Garnet, trying to set up for this Amber, hoping that we just don't have another monster in hand. But we find a Tour Guide, which is everything that we could have wanted. We're going to go Tour Guide for Tour Guide, get the Levier on board. Levier is going to bring back this copy of Rescue Rabbit. Rescue Rabbit is going to activate and summon out 2 Sabersaurs. They could not Veiler that because of the Dimensional Fissure. You cannot send Veiler from hand to graveyard under Fissure. So we get to make this Logia here after walking over their board and in for a bunch of direct damage. And good luck to our opponent. We're going to set this extra Fissure for no real reason. They find a Dark Hole, which is going to be checked by our Logia. And they don't really have any plays from here, so they're going to set this Amber and just pray to God. But we've got this Cabazals coming down. We're going to go for the Levier, the Sea Dragon, summoning up their Garnet, and then walking over their board for lethal. We're going to follow Dino Rabbit up with Dino Fist, or Rabbit Fist, or whatever you want to call it. It's functionally just Dino Rabbit with a Beast Warrior package, so should go relatively the same. Although I do think this deck is arguably better because it does get access to the Fire Fist monsters, which are just phenomenal. We are playing into Bubble Beat, if I remember correctly. I think this is the Bubble Beat game. They've opened Summoner Monk and 4 spells, which typical Bubble Beat hand. And we've got Rabbit, Tensu, Genewolf, Werewolf, 2 of them really, and a tour guide from the underworld. So let's see what goes on here. They're going to draw into a Starlight Road to go Summoner Monk. Summoner Monk is going to pitch this MST to get Stratos. Stratos is going to activate, getting them to hand a Bubble Man. They're going to set 4, go Bubble Man, and then make this instant fusion. And then into a Shockmaster they go, calling spell cards, hoping that we just don't have a bunch of monster plays. But joke's on them, we only have monster plays. We're going to go the Rescue Rabbit for the Sabersaurus. Sabersaurus is going to make the Logia here. And we're going to walk over that Shockmaster with 100. We're going to set down a Compulse and a Tensu because we cannot activate it. And then they're going to rip this MST in their main phase, which is going to be met by the Compulse, sending this Summoner Monk to hand. They are going to rip a Dark Hole because they no longer have a monster on board, but we're going to check that with the Logia. They're going to normal down the Monk again. Monk is going to pitch this instant fusion to get a Bubble Man out of deck. They're going to make a Maystroke in attack position accidentally because they just a misclick, unfortunately. Tensu's going to come down. We're going to double normal summon the Genewolf Werewolves that were in our hand. We're going to go Tiger King. Tiger King's going to get a Tenki. Tenki's going to grab us a Gorilla. We're going to go Tiger King, negating everything so we can walk over this Maystroke and then in for 24. Our opponent's turn. Let's see what they've got. It's a Call the Haunted. That's not going to do quite enough. We get to go this Tour Guide here. Tour Guide is going to summon Tour Guide. And then we're going to make a Zenmains walking in just in case they have a Mirror Force. But it's just a Call of the Haunted, which is not going to do enough. They're going to go Stratos for the Bubble Man. And they actually do a slight misplay here. This, oh, never mind. Wrong game. Never mind. No misplay. They just died. All right, game 2 post side. And we've opened not anything super crazy. Minecon Guaiba might be enough alongside this Effect Failure and Mirror Force. But we do have a vanilla in our hand. It's, it's Dino Rabbit. It's going to happen. Our opponent has opened 2 normal summons in the 7 monster cards they play. So that's a little unfortunate. They're going to draw for turn a Monster Reborn. They're going to go this Summoner Monk. Summoner Monk is going to pitch this MST and be met by this Veiler. They're going to set the Call of the Haunted, which is not currently live, before passing to us. We're going to find a Veiler off the top and go into Guaiba. Guaiba's going to walk over this Summoner Monk, get another Guaiba out of deck, and into Logia we go. They're going to find an MST off the top and rip this Call of the Haunted. We're not too afraid of that, so we're going to let it go. Summoner Monk is going to pitch this Mystical Space Typhoon, which is going to be met by the second Veiler. They're going to normal summon down the Stratos, which is going to be met by the Logia, and they're going to follow up with this Monster Reborn. Monster Reborn is going to get the Stratos online and get them to a Bubble Man. Bubble Man is going to exceed into an Excalibur, which will allow them to get over our Logia, and they're going to Mirror Confusion out a Absolute Zero. Unfortunately, we did forget to set this Mirror Force last turn, just to kind of slip the mind, but it's going to be all right. I promise it'll be all right. They're going to swing in for everything. We're not dead quite yet, but it is looking a little bleak. We find a Genewolf Werewolf off the top. I cannot pronounce that name. We're going to swing over this Summoner Monk and set this Mirror Force. They're going to find a Vanity's Emptiness off the top. This is the game where they're going to misplay. We're going to Mirror Force into that. This Absolute Zero is going to clear our Gene Warped, and they're going to set the Emptiness. We're going to find a Warning. We're going to go to this normal summon of Sabersaurus, walk in for 19, and set this Warning. Here comes E-Call. So here's where the misplay is. If they had flipped up this Vanity's Emptiness and let this E-Call go to Graveyard, they could have gotten a Bubble Man here and then used Bubble Man's effect to draw 2, but they forgot to activate it. So they just have the Bubble Man, which is going to be met by the Warning. And I'm going to be honest, wouldn't have mattered anyway because we had the Warning anyway, so it's fine. They're going to pass over to us. We're going to find another Sabersaurus, which that's Logia. They're going to go Emptiness to stop us from doing that. And we're just going to swing in for double 19s before passing back to our opponent, who's on their last draw. They find a second Emptiness, and that is going to be it. Pretty clean 2 games from the Dino Rabbit decks. Really not surprised. Those decks are very strong. They get to play very low to the ground, but we're doing something a little different here. Now we've got some Evols. We are playing into Rock Control, if I remember correctly. It's hard to tell by this hand because it just has a Ryo and a Max C alongside a Mirror Force and a Bottomless Trap Hole and an MST, where we've got a Compulse, a Shrink, and a Josho, a Dark Hole, and a Reborn. Let's see what we've got here. They're going to draw into Compost going first and set 3 and normal summon this Ryo. We're going to find a Westlow. We're going to Dark Hold this Ryo out of the board so we don't have to deal with it, and set this Westlow before setting 2 and passing. They're going to go MST onto our 1 interaction in the Compulse, and we find Evo Force off the top. We're going to go Westlow flip face up. Westlow is going to summon out from deck under a Maxi. We're going to find a Serrato. Serrato's going to boost itself up as they draw into a Heavy Storm. They're going to Compulse our Serrato to the hand, and then we're going to swing it for 700 with the Westlow. We're going to go end phase. We don't really want to give them any more draws. They're going to draw into a Dark Hole. They're going to go Summoner Monks here. Summoner Monk is going to pitch this Heavy Storm, this Brutal, into another copy of Ryo, which is going to keep us off of our ads. We're going to normal summon out this Serrato. Serrato's going to walk, or attempt to walk over this Summoner Monk, but that's going to be met by a Mirror Force. We're going to chain the Lance here, thankfully, to protect our guy, but we're not going to be able to walk over this Monk. We're going to go main 2. Main 2 is going to activate a Reborn and getting this Thunder King Ryo to our field before it gets bottomless. We're then going to go Evo Force. Evo Force is going to pitch this Westlow. Then we're going to go into a Logia using that guy before being eaten alive by the Ryo. They're going to draw for turn an MST, which is going to snipe out our Shrink here. They're going to go Summoner Monk, pitching their final card in hand in order to get into a Koakimero Guardian, which would have killed itself, so they made a Lavalval Chain instead. Lavalval Chain is going to send the Guardian and stack to the top of their deck a Gaia Plate, the Earth Giant, before walking in for 18. We're going to draw for turn a Diplo, which is not quite enough. We're going to set that. Down comes the Gaia Plate, the Earth Giant. They're going to send another card to the graveyard. It's another rock, so we have Gaia Plate online. Unfortunately, if we look at their graveyard real quick, they are now out of rocks to pay the standby phase cost of the Gaia Plate. So they're going to walk over our guy, but this Gaia Plate is going to die during the standby phase. We're going to find an enemy controller. We're going to go Najasho, combo that with our enemy controller, tributing the Najasho, and taking control of their Gaia Plate. The Najasho is going to get a Volcano from deck. Volcano is going to reborn this Serrato so we can go into a Logia. Technically, we've lost a little bit of damage here by not just swinging with everything, but we get to swing in for 28, and then in the standby phase, this Gaia Plate is going to die, and they're going to set a Judgment they find off the top. We're going to find another Evo Force, not exactly live, so we're just going to walk in with the Logia. We're pretty safe here, and they're going to find off the top a Compulse, which would be live, except for the fact that, you know, we have a Logia here. We're going to just go Combat. They're going to try to Compulse. We're going to Logia that and sink in the last 24 for lethal. Evol game 2, and now they finally have found the rock control parts of the deck. They've got Double Wall, 1 Ryo, a Foolish Burial, and a Mirror Force into our Westlow Volcano, Westlow, Najasho, and a Mirror Force. No good extension on our end, but a Westlow might just be enough to get us somewhere. So let's start this off. They're going to find a 3rd wall, Balatro hand, looking like they're going to normal summon out this Ryo and set this Mirror Force before we find an Evo Force. That's a pretty phenomenal find for us. We're going to set this Westlow and the Mirror Force because we don't want to play into a bad back row. They're going to go Wall. Wall is going to run into our Westlow, but we're going to Mirror Force that so we can keep our spell cards online. They're going to go Foolish Burial for Revival Golem. Revival Golem is going to summon itself to the field. They're going to go the Instant Fusion for Copernala Warrior to make a Mace Stroke and passing it over to us. We're going to find a 2nd Evo Force. We're going to go Westlow here. Weslow's going to summon out a Diplo to clear out this final back row. We're going to go to Najasho. Najasho is going to be tributed for the Evo Force. Evo Force is going to summon out a Serrato, and then the Najasho is going to get another Serrato. We're going to go both of these effects to get to 21. We're going to go the Black Ship of Corn to kill this Mace Stroke and deal 1,000. We're going to go Evo Force again for a Volcano. Volcano is going to get this Serrato out of the graveyard that we detached from the Black Ship of Corn before walking in for a good chunk of damage. I think it would have been better if we went Logia first because that other Serrato could not attack. But we are in a phenomenal spot here. We're going to Logia this Koakimero Wall, and they're going to set this Bottomless Trap Hole. We're just going to normal summon out this Volcano, making a 2nd Logia, which is going to eat this Bottomless Trap Hole, and then we're just going to walk in for lethal. We're going to shrink ourselves for the fun of it. All right, the Dinos have been looking pretty strong so far. Pretty convincing games all around, and now it's time for Jurrac. Going to be totally honest, this is likely a build issue, but we're going to see if Jurrac can stand up to Gladiator Fire Fist, or Gladiator Fist, I guess is a better way of describing it. This deck is really sick. I really like it a lot, actually, but definitely maybe still needs a little bit of work. Our current hand looks kind of atrocious. Double Aolo, Double Lance, and a Summoner Monk into Bottomless, Tensu, Test Tiger, Prisma, and a Hero Lib. So let's see what we've got here. We're going to find a bottomless trap hole off the top. We're going to go Summoner Monk. Summoner Monk is going to send this Lance to get us a Velo from deck before setting a Lance and a trap hole into our opponent, who's going to draw for turn another trap hole. Bottomless trap hole. They're all bottomlesses. They're just, you get it, right? You get it. They're going to go Hero Lives for a Prisma. Prisma is going to get eaten by this bottomless. They're going to go Tensu. We're going to extra normal summon. Not extra normal summon. We're just going to normal summon the Prisma because we didn't use our normal summon. I forgot we Hero Lives. Sorry. They're going to use Prisma to send this Laquari and then special summon out this Test Tiger because the Prisma is now a Gladiator Beast. They're going to go Test Tiger, shuffling back this Prisma to get a Darius on board. This is likely would have been better if the Prisma copied Bestiari, so you could make a Gyazarus here, but misplay in the moment. It is what it is. They're going to make a Tiger King instead. Tiger King is going to get this Tenki. Tenki is going to flip face up and get us a Bear. Bear is going to extra normal summon using the Tensu. We're going to send the Tenki to the graveyard to kill the Velo, so we don't have to worry about it getting over in battle. And then this Tiger King is going to walk into a Forbidden Lance as it tries to get over the Summoner Monk, so the Bear cannot trigger and get them an additional fire formation. They're going to set double bottomless trapple and pass it over to us. We find a Judgment a little late. We're going to go Aolo. Aolo is going to try and get this Velo back, but that's going to be met by one of the bottomlesses. We're going to set this Judgment, and it's not looking good for us. They're going to find a Mystical Space Typhoon and kill our Judgment before walking in for a good chunk of damage. And then they're going to go the Bear to get themselves a Tenki. Tenki's going to activate, get themselves a Darius, and then extra normal summon the Darius. And it's back to us again. We find a Jurrac Dino, which does not do enough, and we're just going to scoop it up because we lose from here. All right, pretty rough game one for the Jurracs, and this game two is not looking a whole lot better, if I'm going to be super real. These are rough ones, but let's see if we can work with it. Our opponent's opened Double Rabbit, which is really, well, there will be no misplays made with that later, but you know, it's going to be okay. We're going to draw into another Lance, so no monsters here. They're going to find an Andal as we pass to them. They're going to MST down this Shrink and go Rescue Rabbit. Rescue Rabbit is going to get double Andal from deck. This is going to let them get into a Tiger King. Tiger King is going to get them a Tenki. Tenki is going to activate, getting them a Fire Fist Bear, and then they're going to walk in for 23. We really need to find a monster here because we are kind of at our wits' end. We find a Velo, which is kind of perfect. We're going to go Velo, walk into the Tiger King, killing itself, and getting ourselves a Gwaiba. Gwaiba is going to then walk in, and a damage step, we can go Forbidden Lance to walk over the Tiger King and trigger the Gwaiba. Gwaiba to summon Gwaiba. We're going to go main 2, make a Lagia, and we now actually have some interaction. They're going to draw for a turn a Solemn Warning as we set this Lance, and they're going to go Lightning Vortex to try and out our Lagia, but we have a Forbidden Lance. And they're going to go Bear. Bear is going to be met by this Lagia, and we're going to MST this Unknown as they set it. So no interaction now, but we put them down to pretty much nothing. We find a Forbidden Dress off the top. We're going to set 2 and then just walk in for 24. And it's up to our opponent to find something to do here. They're going to find a Bestiar and normal summon this Rabbit. No targets in deck. Unfortunate. Unfortunately, I don't even know if any other play would have mattered too much. These two Gladiator Beasts are really not doing anything into a face of a 2400 monster. And unfortunately for them, any additional draws from us would have likely just put us even further in the driver's seat. So I don't really know if the surrender matters too much. All right, time for that all-important game 3. And our opponent has opened Rescue Rabbit once again. It's glued to their hand. So we're going to see what we can do here. We've got a Lightning Vortex, a Dino, a Fossil Dig to find us any Dino name, although we have both Gwaiba and Dino already, so we don't really need it. We have a Bottomless and, of course, the Gwaiba into our opponent's Rabbit, double MST, Bottomless, and Fire Fist Bear. So let's see what they've got. They're going to find a Prisma off the top and go Rescue Rabbit. Rescue Rabbit is going to get the double Andal, as we saw previously. They're going to go into Tiger King. Tiger King is going to get themselves a Tenki. Probably could have been a Tensu here to get this Bear on board, but it's all right. They're going to set this MST and this Trap Hole before passing it over to us, where we're going to activate a Fossil Dig. Fossil Dig is going to get us an ALO for a future turn. We're going to go Lightning Vortex to clear the board, go ALO to get this Dino out of Graveyard, but that is going to be met by the Bottomless. We're going to set Bottomless and Compulse of our own before one of them gets eaten by the MST, and then in their draw phase, they're going to eat the second one. All right, it's their board to play with. They're going to go for Bear. Bear is going to sink in 17 and trigger its effect to get themselves a copy of Tensu. They're going to go the Tensu activation for the extra normal summon of Laquari before making a second Tiger King. Tiger King is going to get them a Tenki, and they cannot choose not to activate it here. We're going to go Guaiba. We do draw into a Lance, which is literally perfect here. We're going to go Lance, shrinking down this Tiger King before Guaiba summons out another Guaiba. And then we're going to go main 2 to make a Logia. We are now in control of the board again. Our opponent draws into a very dead Heavy Storm. They're going to go for Tenki. Tenki's going to normal summon out this Darius. They're going to extra normal summon down the bear using Tensu. And we are going to Logia the bear because that is the most threatening thing on their board. We find a monk off the top, which we probably shouldn't have set here because the Gladiator Beast names love running into face downs, and we're going to see that right here as this Bestiary walks into our Summoner Monk and then triggers itself to shuffle into the deck to get a Murmillo so they can pop our Logia. Back to us, we're going to find off the top a Fossil Dig, which is any Jurrac name, which is exactly what we need. So we find a Guaiba. Guaiba is going to walk into this Summoner or into this Murmillo and then find ourselves a Velo out of deck. We're going to go Logia again, and now this is pretty much going to be game. They find a second Prisma. The Prisma is going to walk over their Summoner Monk, but this is not what they needed. They needed a Gladiator Beast name there. We find a Velo. Velo is going to normal summon, walk into this Prisma, and trigger summoning another Velo before swinging in for 17, and then the Logia in for 24. And before we pass back to our opponent, who's going to find a Mirror Force off the top, which would be pretty nice if they were not facing down a Logia. They're going to summon out this Prisma to try and bait in this Velo, which does happen, but unfortunately we have the Logia for the Mirror Force. So the same thing is going to happen again. Velo's going to summon Dino, and we're going to walk in for lethal. Clean sweep for the Dinos in the replays today. I do think some of these lists definitely do need a little bit of extra help. They're for sure not ready quite yet. But I think they're in a good spot, or at the very least, they're getting there. I think Jurrac for sure needs some extra work. I am not the best Jurrac pilot. I'm not even the best Jurrac builder. That's probably pretty obvious by how the decks look, but it is what it is. Overall, I think Dinos are in a really interesting spot in Meadowlands. I think Dino Rabbit and Dino Rabbit Fist are both genuinely phenomenal decks. I think they are legitimately good strategies that you could just pick up and play. They're relatively simple and very easy to pilot, but they do have a good bit of mastery to them, knowing when to deploy certain trap cards and how to manage your resources, because they don't have a resource loop of their own. I like these decks a lot. I think they're great to give to newcomers to the format just because they are both competent and relatively easy to pick up, as I've already mentioned. And then we get a little bit more into the weeds there with Evol and Jurrac. I think Jurrac is a funny pet deck. I think the synchros are cute, although they're not very good, unfortunately. And Evols, I think, are what you give to someone who really wants to play dinosaurs but does not want to play Dino Rabbit. I think Evol is, even if it's not as good as Dino Rabbit, it is an interesting game plan. It has some fun interactions. You get to mess around with like the econ stuff. And even though it's not as good as Dino Rabbit or Dino Rabbit Fist, I think it is still a fun, casual deck that still has some room for experimentation. At the very least, I will say I think these decks are certainly better off than Psychic Synchro, which was our last topic for Scrapyard. I think maybe Jurrac is around the level of Psychic Synchro unless we find a better build for it, which definitely does exist. It's just currently hard to find like a reason to play Jurrac when Evols and Dino Rabbit and Dino Fist all exist. So it's kind of weird, right? I am still pretty sad that there is not just like a deck that only plays dinosaurs that is like relevant. Jurrac is the closest thing we have for that. And the most important thing about Jurrac is that Guaiba winning a trade puts you into a phenomenal position. That's definitely the best part about Jurrac, is like Guaiba and Velo are good cards, which sucks because the actual like intended game plan for Jurracs to make their synchro monsters is really cool. It's just unfortunately not good enough here. With all that said, though, I want to thank you all so much for sticking around for this Scrapyard. I do think this is more of a proto Scrapyard. It doesn't have everything that I really want to do going forward with Scrapyard stuffs, because these decks just don't really kind of lend themselves to what I want to be doing for Scrapyards. But I wanted to talk about all of these decks in one sitting, and I feel like the best place for that is in a Scrapyard. Next Scrapyard is going to be a little bit more in line with how I want to be doing Scrapyards going forward. That is going to be Ninja. And I'm really excited to talk about that engine and what it means in the context of Meadowlands, because I think it allows for a lot of really silly brews. So That's going to be it for me. I want to thank you all so much for sticking around to the end of this very long video, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.